Be different.
Go ahead and click on that.
There will be different, trying to get back to the camera. Chat. So there'll be different workshops and seminars that I'd like to teach
Okay.
to the disabled.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why I'm taking all these webinars to kind of get an idea of which kind of webinars and seminars I'd like to teach. But I sent you the link. I'm getting ready to get my credentials with the healthy living community.
I like that.
So that I can go online and do workshops and stuff.
Well, let's dive in. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. And you see my blue screen on your screen?
Yes.
Feel free to interrupt me at any point. Since it's just you and me, we're going to have some fun with this. And so if you have questions or comments, just interrupt me or raise your hand and I'll watch your screen as well so that I can see you. If you have a notepad, grab that. And we're going to go through this pretty quickly. So in the 12 journeys, this comes from the book, The Giants and the Smalls, The Adventure of Remy and Rit. I wrote this book about 12 years ago. I was going through a really hard time in my life, probably one of the darkest times of my life. I was bankrupt. I was foreclosed on. My marriage was a mess at the time. And I didn't have money. I was getting my food at a welfare center. And I had a conversation with a gentleman named Steve Hardison that really opened my eyes up to possibilities. And so it was from that and the book, Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, that I decided I would write a book similar to that. And so that's where the book came from, was Spencer Johnson and Steve Hardison. So
okay,
I've got those two giants to recognize in my journey and more. There's a lot more. But what we've created here is from the book, we noticed that there were 12 journeys that evolved for every person that's trying to reach their potential. And we start initially with the root journeys. So we really dive into the hard stuff, because if you don't dive into that, a lot of times we'll put on new programs on old programming and they just don't work. And so we found that it's really, really important to slow down with the roots, going back to our culture, our values, our grief, all the stuff we avoided. And so we start with our unconsciousness. So we're going to go through all 12 journeys in this. It'll be kind of an overview. So it's really hard to dive in deeply into each of them, but we'll get a sense of the concepts here. So unconsciousness, that's the level of automation that we all have. We're born with the ability to create automation. Alfred North Whitehead, he says that civilization advances by extending the number of important operations we can do without thinking, right? And if you think about that, most of what we do is unconscious. We don't have to think about it, which makes it a lot easier.
just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. The challenge is that it's also unconscious. And so anything that we've programmed in is wired in so that we don't have to think about it. But sometimes there are some unuseful behaviors that we've programmed in that we've got to change. And so I love diving into the brain and how it works. Our brain is full of neurons, 86 billion neurons, 85 billion glial cells. So an equal number, and they think maybe 2 to 3 times that number in glial cells, which are support cells. So when a neuron fires, these glial cells come in and support it and create brain structures and efficiency so that eventually there's automation. And then it's from that automation that we're able to do things without thinking. And so these oligodendrocytes, these are what wrap the axon on a neuron. I get a little nerded out. So if I'm losing you, just catch me up. And
not losing me. I do have an RN license.
Yeah, there you go. So you got this. There we go. So you're speaking my language here. When a neuron fires, initially it'll fire really clunky and slow, not very efficient. But the more you fire it, these oligodendrocytes come in and they wrap it and they create what's called a myelin sheath around it. And that makes it fire faster and faster. So your slowest neuron fires at 1 mile per hour and your fastest is 268 miles per hour. So that's as fast as a Bugatti Veyron at full speed. That's fast. And so if you have your hand in the fire, you want the one that's firing fast to be the one that responds. And so when you're creating a new behavior, what I tell my clients is that you've got to be willing to suck at something long enough to get good at it, because initially you're not going to be very efficient. You're going to have to use a lot of energy thinking about it, but over time, it's going to get more and more automated. The brain has limitless capacity, but we tend to tell stories that say that we don't have that. So we tell ourselves all the reasons why we can't do something, and that limits us, but it's not because of a limitation in the brain. They've done research studies that showed that if they removed half of the brain, it would still perform most of the functions that we need for our lives. And so that just tells us that the brain, yeah, you're good. I see that.
Yeah, he wants eggs.
So if you think about the capacity of the brain, we have the ability to store the entire internet in our brain. We can store up to 3 million hours of TV, which would be about 300 hours of watch time straight for 300 years, or 300 years of watch time, not 300 hours. There are over 100 trillion atoms in our brain and over 700 trillion synaptic connections in our brain. Yet we go about telling ourselves all the reasons why we can't do something. And so the purpose of the book, The Giants and the Smalls, was the idea that many of us have this story going on where we have the small version of ourselves where we tell ourselves all the limiting beliefs. I can't because, or I'm not special. And the brain doesn't care. It'll store it all. So whatever you want to tell as your story is what the brain's going to come in and automate. And so that's where we start to see in our world what it is we're perceiving. So this goes back to our value systems. So if you think about it, initially, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, we have traditional values or proto values that are handed down to us from our culture, from our family. And it's essentially like our family members or our friends or associates said, here's some clothes, put these on, let's go. And so that becomes the initial value system that we use to perceive the world. That's how we think the world works, becomes part of our story, our history, and then it impacts our beliefs. So our values are the things that are important to us. And it's from that we create our beliefs, which are the things that we hold dear. And it's what we believe about ourselves and our abilities. It's our right and wrong, kind of our ethics. And then from there, we have our perceptions. So we start to see the world from that point of view, and we think that's the way it is. And then we have predictions. So before words, the word prediction comes from prediction, which means before words. So we're out there projecting our world out with our words and our perceptions. And then we speak it into the world, and then we act on it, and we create results. And that confirms our perception and anchors in our stories so that we really see in our world what it is that's going on inside of us. And the challenge for a lot of people is they think, the world can't change. It's outside of me to do anything about my situation. And so what this opens up is that not only do you have the capacity, the limitless capacity already within you, but by changing and rewriting that story, now you have the ability to impact your objective world and the world that you see around you. Perception's a crazy thing. The mind makes sense of whatever it wants to make sense of. And so however we perceive the world is how we're going to see it. Can you read that on the screen?
I'm like, okay, so is he dyslexic?
Yeah. And this is interesting because as long as the first and last letter of this are correct, you can read this. Can you read that?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Like our brain has the ability to solve problems, to perceive things, to value things, to recognize things in our environment that support our story. And so this is a concept here that I call the tree of change. And it's the idea that at our root, at our core, are our cultural values. For some people that might be religion, that might be politics, that might be personal beliefs, familial beliefs, what you do and don't do, who you are, who you can be, who you can't be. So in a way, it's the initial or proto values that we were raised with, where we build a foundation for everything else that follows. And so it's from there that we start to establish our own value system. Some of it will anchor into those proto values. Some people will go completely away from their original culture. They'll just go in a different direction and they'll create their own value system and belief system. And then they'll start to create the world around that. So your beliefs are the things that you hold dear. And then those beliefs impact your thoughts. So your thoughts impact your affect, which are your emotions. So your thoughts come always before your feelings. And so as you're thinking something, it's projecting out, creating affect, an effect on other people, right? And then it's from that you create your purpose and your behaviors, and you speak your world, and you create the fruit of your world, your objective reality. And so what we value, what we believe, what we think, what we feel becomes our purpose, our words, our behaviors, and then our reality. And then it cycles back through. Now, if somebody else comes in, there's an external event, or we have an internal perception that can impact our affect, our emotions. And then it goes backward. Now we're going back into the thoughts and our beliefs, and then we feel a little challenged in that. So in order to not feel everybody's emotions, we create sensory perception filters. There's so much data going on around us that to pay attention to it all, we have the ability to see it, but not process it. So we create filters based on the thoughts, beliefs, and values that we have, so that we only feel or see or experience the world in the way that aligns with who we are on the inside. Does that make sense? So we create our experience.
You get good.
So, your events, perceptions, affect, attention, it affects your attention and what you're giving growth to based on what you're paying attention to and acting on. That impacts our thoughts. We have 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. A lot of people think, man, if I could just stop my thoughts, I'd be okay. Well, that's like trying to cut down a tree one leaf at a time. That would be really challenging. And so the value of this program is to learn to love your thoughts and to work with them. So we're going to have thoughts that occur at a conscious, a pre-conscious, and an unconscious level. So this goes back to Sigmund Freud's work of the idea of the unconscious. So we have automations that happen. A lot of those are for the body, so managing and regulating the body. But a lot of your traumas and heavy emotions and intense experiences are actually at an unconscious level. They're stored throughout the body. So often people will be triggered, but they won't have words for it. They'll know it's there. They'll know the feeling, but they don't quite have words for it. So it's at this level that you can't quite access. And then pre-conscious is kind of like driving the car. Some days you can be very conscious about it, but other days you don't remember how you got to work. And so we have the ability to pull things into the consciousness for a moment and then automate them, pull them back, automate them. So that's the pre-conscious. And so that's where we have this ability to pull things up to work on them and then put them back. The more we do them, the more automated they become. But at any point we can take the wheel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we are the drivers. And then at some point, some of these become just who we are. They're so unconscious that it's just our character at a level we no longer access. And so what we want to focus on are the top layers of consciousness and pre-consciousness. How do we create new behaviors in such a way that we create automations that are actually useful to us? And so in the unconscious state, what we want to do is make automatic and habitual as early as possible, as many useful actions as we can. Now, if you didn't do that during development up until the age of 25, you have a chance to do that now. And that's a beautiful thing. So the more the details of our daily life we can hand over to the effortless custody of automatism, I like that word, the more our higher powers of mind will be set free to their own proper work. So now when we automate things, we open up to being able to do bigger and more giant things. Did you have any questions on that?
No, I'm taking some notes.
Awesome. Okay. So now we open up to awareness, right?
Yeah.
So now we go into the space of waking up to our power, to our ability to change, our ability to take control of our thoughts, values, and actions. And the challenge with most people is that they don't like what's underneath. So they take a program and they put it on top. It's like frosting dog poop. It's like the dog poop's still in there. You got to work on that stuff. So when you take a new program or behavior and you put it on top of your old programming, it's not very effective.
Let me close my door. My neighbor decides to play his music now.
Yeah, yeah. And where it's just you and me, I'll pause for a minute here.
No, I'm just.
Keep going.
He just pulled the truck. No,
All
he
right.
just pulled the truck in the back here and turned the music on.
So
outside of my apartment, the door
Yeah.
is near the back gate.
Okay.
So when they park in the parking lot, I hear it all.
All right. So here's where we're going to dive in, because when people become conscious of their ability to change, a lot of times really heavy emotions come up, a lot of judgments come up, really negative feelings and thoughts or anxiety about the future. So awareness will often, in many people, bring up judgments. And our goal with this program is to move from being a judge over our lives to being an observer, kind of like a lab coat or a researcher would do, right? We step back from it. We have neutrality about the experience. We're just looking at it. It's interesting. It's curious. I wonder why I do that. It creates some room between us and the behavior so that we're not the behavior, but we recognize that it's present. But if the judge is present, now we're judging ourselves as broken, as inferior, as like we don't fit in or we're not enough. We start comparing ourselves. We get jealous of other people. That's when you know the judge is present. We get unforgiving. We're critical. We seek perfection. You know, perfection is a sign of anxiety. If I do it perfectly, people will accept me. We don't feel like we're worthy. We start to pity ourselves and isolate ourselves. We think that everything's outside of our control. So we have an external, we don't have an external locus of control, or we think it's on somebody else to help us change. But the observer would look at it and say, I have the control to change. I'm noticing things. I see things. They're present, but they're not me, right? If you were to describe this to an alien, you would be able to describe it from a space of this is what's happening. This is the experience of it. The thing with justifications or judgments is that there are perceptions of the world, and your judgments are your truths. So you have justifications inside of the story that you're telling that tell you why that's accurate. And people will speak it as though it's the truth, and it is a truth. It is their subjective truth, but it might not be the objective truth. So we tell ourselves stories and then we justify those, and then that becomes our truth. And then we act as though that's the way the world is, and nothing changes because it's not in our control to change it. It's outside of us. So we have a chance to really get honest with ourselves. The word honest means to own. It means to just simply, this is the story I'm telling and I own it. That's it. So that's what the word honest means. And so we're having a chance to really look at our story. Brene Brown says you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. Like really trying to fit in or be accepted, but not owning our story. And so there's a chance to really look at what's going on, but not judge ourselves for it, right? You're human. That's what humans do. We have stuff that goes on within us, and we all do it. And so there's a chance to really just own that. So Byron Katie, as long as you think that the cause of your problem is out there, as long as you think that anyone or anything is responsible for your suffering, the situation is hopeless. It means that you are forever in the role of victim, that you're suffering in paradise. What a statement, right? You have all this possibility around you, but as long as it's out there, I can't change it. So here I am suffering in possibility in paradise. And so how do you change it? One of the ways to do that in the story, I talk about the small who looks up at the giants, and the first time in his life, he thinks, man, why are there giants? How did they get there? Can I do that? And so he starts to ask these expansive observer questions versus restrictive judgment questions. So instead of asking, why am I like this? Or why does this happen to me? Or why is it always that way? Or why can't I? Now we're looking at the observer of what's possible. What else can I do? Okay. So this moves us into the journey of grief, which is an interesting thing because we go through unconsciousness and awareness. And then when we wake up to our situation, we also often feel a real sadness about our ideals, about where we are compared to our ideal. Rumi says that joy lives concealed in grief. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about grief being the antithesis of trauma, that people who have trauma never got to grieve properly, and therefore they never healed properly. And so grief is the thing that leads us to feeling joy. The word grief comes from gravare, which means heavy, to cause grief, from gravis, meaning weighty, right? So it's a heaviness that we feel about our situation. Susan Anderson in her work talks about abandonment. Abandonment can feel like grief. It can feel like a form of depression and anxiety. So she talks about the swirl method, that we go through a shattering of our lives, the way that we knew it. We withdraw, we start internalizing, we get mad about it, and then we start to lift, right? In grief work, when somebody's dying or we're dying, we go through denial. This isn't happening to me. Then we get angry. Then we bargain. Well, can we do something? Can we change it? I'll do anything. We pray to God and say, I'll do this if you'll do this, right? We start bargaining. Then we feel depression, and then we accept it, right? Then we move into acceptance and moving forward. So there's a process of grieving that allows us to feel the heavy emotions, move through them, and re-engage in a new way with a new situation. We've had people on our show that have lost limbs. We had one lady that she broke her leg skiing. They amputated her leg 3 times. And so she lost her leg, and she talks about a homesickness for her leg. She misses it. And so but she's had to adapt to the new way of being. And she's done very well with it. See, I think depression is useful, but most people don't see it that way. And it's because we get stuck in the cycle of rumination. So depression is designed to get us to resign from the situation. It gets us to pull energy back from the thing that's not working. And then it causes us to reflect and ruminate on what's not working. And then we really see reality like it is. We see our reality and our situation exactly as it is, not as the delusion we've created in our mind. And then from there, we can create a reverence and a respect for the situation. And then we can re-engage in a new direction. I love the dog there.
I know. I'm trying to tell him it's enough. It's time to get down.
It's a little, he's like a little baby. I love it. He's just snuggling.
He's 1 year old. He turned 1 on the 27th.
Oh, that's amazing.
Of May. So
as we move through depression, you go through the resignation, the reflection, the reality check.
Exactly.
Then we create a respect and a reverence for the experience, and then we re-engage in a new way, and we call that resilience. Our ability to move through that is our resilience. It's our ability to take a hard situation, pivot, move in a new direction, and re-engage, right? And so that's where depression is useful. Lisa Feldman Barrett said that numerous experiments showed, and she's a top researcher in the field on emotions, but she said that experiments showed that people feel depressed when they fail to live up to their own ideals. But when they fall short of the standards set by others, they feel anxious. And what's crazy about this is that what we think are the standards of others, like Brad Blanton says, are actually our own ideals. So he says the stress that kills or cripples most of the population comes from people's being too hard on themselves when they don't live up to their own imaginings about how other people think they should behave. So when we think we know what other people are thinking, and then we judge ourselves off of that, then we feel distressed because we think we know what they're thinking and that we're not measuring up to it. And so we feel anxiety or stress around not fitting in when it's all inside of our own selves. And so to be able to move through grief, one of the tools that we use is acceptance, right? To accept means to receive willingly. This is where I'm at. This is my life. I'll take it. A lot of people don't want it there. They don't want to accept their life as it is. It's akin to fighting a bear in the field. You drive down the road, you see a bear in the field. You might not want that bear to be in the field, but if you can just let the bear be in the field, it's okay. And some people will go out there and fight the bear and get in a fight with it. The bear's going to win. Same thing with our emotions. If we can allow and create space for our emotions to be present, then there's room for them, but then also we can re-engage with the other things that we're creating in our lives. Paul Tournier says that acceptance of one's life has nothing to do with resignation. It doesn't mean you're resigning to the situation. It doesn't mean you're running away from the struggle. On the contrary, it means accepting it as it comes. So we're looking at acceptance as it is what it is, right? Jan van Sant says that acceptance does not mean agreement. Doesn't mean we love it or agree with it. Doesn't mean that
In
we
the
feel good
meantime,
about it, what we're facing. It means that we're willing to look for and embrace the lesson. It also indicates a willingness to grow through the experience. So part of the acceptance is the forgiveness, right? The best way to escape from the past is not to avoid or forget, but to accept it and forgive it. My favorite definition of forgiveness is to not cause additional harm to ourselves or others. If that were the simple definition, this is from a researcher, that we don't cause additional harm to ourselves for what's happened. We don't cause additional harm to ourselves because of who we've been. We don't cause harm to other people because of the situation. It's a willingness to let it be what it is and move through it. Dr. Maraboli says that letting go isn't about having the courage to release the past. It's about having the wisdom to embrace the present. That's all we're trying to do, is get people out of the depression of the past and the anxieties of the future and get into the right now, because that's where change happens. One of the tools for doing that is gratitude. So if you think about your emotions, we're going to talk about some tools to help you get back to your power. So you think about emotions and ways of being. You've got a lifetime of being a certain person, a lifetime. You're very good at it. There's a lot of gravity to it, a lot of mass to it, a lot of efficiencies around it. It's like the earth in this picture. It warps the field around you. So if you create a new behavior, kind of like the moon in this image, often the old behavior will pull the new behaviors back in, right? You haven't created enough mass yet around the new behavior to create it as its own standing entity, way of being. And so the goal is to stay with something so that it gains mass, so that eventually that becomes the new way of being. And only whatever you create. There's no way. It's not like I could say, tree, you need to be this way, which is what a lot of cultures and people do, is you've got to be this way. But it's how you want to be for yourself, based on your value systems and your ethics and beliefs. And so whatever that is, you got to practice it. And as you practice it, it grows. Lisa Feldman Barrett said that emotions are not reactions to the world. They're your constructions of the world. An emotion is your brain's creation of what your bodily sensations mean in relation to what's going on around you in the world. So we are creating our world. Our emotions support it. So when we're feeling small, what I hope to do with people is get them back to their awareness, regulate their emotions, create space for it to be what it is, re-engage with your vision, and step back into alignment with that, and then go back to work on creating yourself. And it's a simple process. We go from small to giant, small to giant, small to giant, over and over again. So there are some tools for doing that. Gratitude is a very efficient tool for doing that. It's the same root word as grief, so it's heaviness, right? The ground where your dreams begin to grow. It's a readiness to show appreciation for and a return to kindness. It's acknowledging the good that you already have in your life. It's the foundation of all abundance. And there are some real health benefits to gratitude. So you're more resilient to stress. You have a higher association with, or it's highly associated with lower depression, lowers blood pressure. That's a big thing. Reduces the LDL and increases HDL in the body by being grateful. You get better sleep, increased life satisfaction. So there's a lot of health benefits. Actually releases dopamine and serotonin in the body, which are both beneficial for drive and creation. So it really puts you back into the space of being present. How often should you do it? Research says at least if you did it at a minimum once a week, it would actually be more effective than doing it daily. And so if you can tap into your gratitude at least once a week, but really be with it, it's going to be more efficient than trying to do it as a task. Because once it becomes automated, there's no emotion. Does that make sense? Without emotion, there's no gratitude. There's no change.
Sure.
So when we step into empowerment, if we're feeling disempowered, a lot of times we're feeling dysregulated. Our emotions have taken over. So we no longer have our full brain. We have simply that emotional brain where the chemicals are reacting. Reaction and creation are the same words. They're just rearranged. And so we're reacting to our world, not creating our world when our emotions take over. Dr. Edith Eger says that suppressing the feeling only makes it harder to let them go. So one of the first steps is to express it. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling depression. Expression is the opposite of depression. Fear and depression are stories. They're often stories that are supported by your emotions and then realized in our actions. So we have these thoughts that created the emotions, and then those emotions create our actions, and our actions create our outcome, and our outcome confirms our story. And so we get stuck in this cycle. And so if we can rewrite that story, we have a chance to create new emotions. You can tame your emotions. You're kind of like a wild horse, but it takes getting to know the emotions. Too many people are avoiding their emotions. They're numbing out. They're drinking them away, or they're drugging them away, or they're sexing them away, right? And
That's
so
true.
they're for feeling. Glennon Doyle says, I didn't know before that woman told me that all feelings were for feeling. Emotions are for feeling. I did not know that I was supposed to feel everything. I thought that I was supposed to feel happy. I thought that happy was for feeling, and that pain was for fixing and numbing and deflecting and hiding and ignoring. I thought that when life got hard, is big cause it was because I had gone wrong somewhere. I thought that the pain was weakness, that I was supposed to suck it up. But the thing was that the more I sucked it up, the more food in and booze I had to suck down. I keep the note stuck to my bathroom mirror, feel it all. Feel it all. I like the analogy of the bus, right? Your emotions are passengers on the bus, right? So you're the driver of the bus. So emotions come on, anger's throwing a fit. Anger can ride the bus, they can throw a fit, but if you engage with anger, you stop driving the bus. If you engage with anger, anger wins. So you let anger throw a fit on the bus. It bought a ticket to be there, it has permission to be there, but you don't have to engage with it. The Buddhists call it sitting by the river, observing the river. If you jump in the river of the emotion, it's going to carry you away. It's going to knock you down. But if you can stand by it and look at it, you can see the emotion, see it as an observer, and kind of move past it, let it flow, right? I think of Frozen, that came to mind. Let it go. That's a little different. So as strange as it sounds, Barry Macdonald is the author of the book Dare, which is about anxiety and overcoming anxiety. He says, as strange as it sounds, the greatest obstacle to healing your anxiety is you. You're the cure. In essence, you must learn to get comfortable in your anxious discomfort. The secret to recovery, however, is that once you reach a point where you really grow and accept it, it begins to fall away and discharge naturally. So the more we accept our emotions, a lot of times they just fade. They're meant to be felt. They're meant for healing. And we don't want to feel them. One of the ways that you can really impact your body and get it to have a tolerance for stress are ice baths, ice showers, cold immersion. I'll go up and cut a hole in the lake and dive into the ice water when in the middle of winter. There's a shock that happens to the body, but it causes you to develop a healthy level of stress in the body so that you have more tolerance. So cold showers are actually really effective. There's a lot of research on that. Smell is the only thing that bypasses the thalamus in the brain. Every other one goes through the thalamus, every other sense. The smell goes right to the brain. So if you're struggling, smell something. Take some essential oils, smell a rose, smell the flowers, right? They say you can do that. Grounding, putting our feet in the dirt. We have thousands of connections in our feet that are meant to connect with the electrons in the earth. So putting your feet in the dirt, in the sand, is very healing. It reconnects us with our power. And that's all we're trying to do here, is get our power back. We're trying to re-engage the brain so that now we have the ability to consciously create our future. Does that make sense? So these first 6 journeys that we went through are all about handling and regulating the emotions of the body and getting into our power. Because when we can get into our power and get at peace with who we are and what's going on, then we're empowered to create it differently. If we're fighting what is, we don't have any energy to create anything new because we're fighting what is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this brings us to the next 5 journeys, which are growth journeys. And how are you doing energetically? Is there anything that you want me to dive into a little deeper? or is this making sense?
No, I'm just getting messages from different people, and one from my pastor about helping with the food bank today. He wants to
That's
be
perfect.
there at 12 o'clock, and I'm like, it's 11:30. So,
Well, I'm going to keep going. And if you need to jump, I'll finish out and you can come back to it. Okay. So
okay, so you're going to email it to me?
I will keep recording. And so I can email it to you.
Can you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. If you need to jump out, I'm going to keep this going and I'll finish this out and send it to you.
Okay,
Does that
that'll
sound
work.
good? Awesome.
Yeah, let me go ahead and go to the church and help them.
Excellent.
Nice
It was nice to meet you. Thanks for being on.
to meet you.
We'll see you. All right. So one of the big things of uncertainty is when we go through our empowerment. So we get empowered. Now we're stepping into the unknown. It's like, now what? What do I want to create with my world? So there's a cycle in my book, The Art of Accomplishment, that I call the cycle of certainty, or the uncertain cycle. What it is whenever we have a new insight, inspiration, thought, we take some kind of action toward it. So we have the thought or the idea, we take some action. We don't know how it's going to go. We've got speculation about it. We're kind of predicting out as much as we can with what we do know. So we start testing, right? So we test things and we start having repetition and we see how it works. And then we start to get what's called a sense of certainty. So the more you do something, the more you gain certainty around it. So there's no more not knowing, there's no more speculation. And then you move into the space of knowing. So a sense of certainty is like going to Vegas and putting a quarter in the slot machine and pulling the handle and winning the jackpot in your very first quarter. And you could say with a sense of certainty that putting a quarter in the slot machine is going to win the jackpot every time. What we know through testing is that's not accurate. And so you can have a sense of certainty about a lot of things, but still have room for speculation and not knowing. And so with more testing, we find out what's certain. We know that we can count on certain things. Certainty is the ability to count on things happening over and over again. We know that the sun will come up. It has for millions of years. It may not. There is a possibility it may not. But for the most part, we know we can count on it. So we know things. That becomes knowledge because then we learn how to use it. That becomes wisdom. And then often when we have wisdom, we want to teach it. And then when we teach it, it inspires something in somebody else and they go through this cycle again. And then we anchor those in as our subjective truths. And sometimes they're objective truths. They're truths that all of us can count on. And so it's through testing that we learn certainty. But what we want to do is start embracing uncertainty, because uncertainty puts us in a position of knowing reality. We talk about the grief cycle. You start to see reality exactly as it is. And then you see what's possible. When you can get into the space of accepting that your life is what it is, that the situation is what it is, then you can start to explore what's possible, what's next. You know, this quote here, when nothing is sure, everything is possible. When you don't know how it's going to play out, everything's a possibility, positive, negative. I like to lean toward the positive on it. You know, at first dreams seem impossible, then improbable, then inevitable, right? It's like, yeah, that's a possibility. Oh my gosh, that really could happen. Oh my heck, dude, that's going to happen. It's inevitable. So allow space for that. Nassim Nicholas Taleb said that we are the empirical decision makers who hold that uncertainty is our discipline. So we want to start loving and embracing uncertainty, the unknown. In the story, Rit goes out and he starts venturing into the unknown. He doesn't know what it's like to be in the land of the giants. He doesn't have the answers yet. He's willing to go out there and travel on the unknown path, not really knowing what to expect, but he's willing to get out there and do it. So in this quote, the understanding of how to act under conditions of incomplete information is the highest and most urgent human pursuit. Too many of us get comfortable in the discomfort. We get comfortable in where we are because we know it, even if it's uncomfortable. But if you can get into loving and embracing uncertainty, you start exploring what's possible. Now, the other thing that's available to us is the idea of abundance, right? The universe, in my view, is abundant. It is the default nature of things. We'll see that in another quote here. It means that there are great numbers, that they overflow. It means to have copious amounts of something. It abounds, right? And most things do abound in this universe, but our stories going back to the idea of our unconscious stories, create limitation. So we don't often see that. This is why Wayne Dyer, when he says abundance is not something we acquire, it is something we tune into. It's recognizing that abundance is already ours. It's already around us, which means that now we have the resources to draw from to create anything that we can imagine. That's why I can create a program like this that you're watching right now. It came from an idea. And then I took that idea and blended it with the resources that were available to me. And then I fine-tuned those resources. And then I was able to teach that to you and have it distributed out through programs I didn't have to create. The universe is infinite and abundance is the default nature of things. Elon Musk didn't have to create Mars to fly to it. He didn't have to create the molecules to create the materials, to create the rocket ships and the spacesuits and everything else that was available to him. He had to create those. He just transformed them from the form they were in to something else. Abundance seems to be all around us. It's in nature. Think about your human body. You didn't have to create your body so that you could have this experience. It was done for you. It's already here. The 86 billion neurons, the 86 billion glial cells, the 7,000 facial expressions that we can make, 7 octillion atoms. That's a 7 with 8 zeros behind it. Atoms in a single human body, 37 trillion cells in the human body, 100,000 miles of blood vessels, where we pump over 200 million liters of blood. How much of that did you create today? 500 megapixel lenses for eyes. That's 500 million pixels in a single shot in your human eye. That's more than any camera that's ever been invented. It's incredible. I mean, how many of you had to get up and create that today so that you could use it? It was given to you. It's a gift. So when we start looking at the abundance that's around us, then we can start seeing opportunities around us. Think about the sun and how much energy it puts out. Only 1/1000th of its energy hits the earth. 1/1000th of the sun's energy hits the earth, and it's enough to create everything that we see that's living. It's a beautiful thing. It's the chaos that's around us. And the only reason it's chaos is because it hasn't been organized. So when you take uncertainty in what's possible, and then you take the raw materials that are around you, the chaos, the mine of creation, as Richard Paul Evans says, then you can start to transform things from the way that they are to something new. You can transform your life from the way that it is to something new. Think of Legos. If I were to dump out Legos, some of you are going to create a creation that's very blocky, very simple. Some of you are going to create something like this. Similar opportunities, similar materials, an ability to see what's possible, and an ability to draw from the abundance that already surrounds us and create what it is we can imagine. It's the ability to take resources that are available and transform them into anything that we can imagine. And so it's meeting limited circumstances with unlimited thoughts. We take our perception, we speak it to the world, we mold and create things, and those come out into the world as a gift. And then it confirms that we have the ability to do that. And we do it again and again and again. And the pinnacles to climb are endless. Truthfully, there is no limit to what we can create if we're willing to start seeing that, start acting on it, start transforming our lives from what already exists. So this is where you get a chance to really create vision. In the book, the giant puts the small on his shoulder and stands up so that he can have a view like a giant would have, because smalls were used to seeing the things that were in front of them. That's it. We often do that. All we see is what's available to us or what we've already experienced without recognizing that there could be more. And so the giant puts him on his shoulder and expands out the view. Sometimes we have people in our lives that will let us stand on their shoulders, metaphorically, where we can see the world a little differently. And that's a chance for us to envision something. So when I say vision, I say that loosely because some people don't see visions with images and pictures. They don't see that. It's called aphantasia. So it's something imagined in the mind, in the supernatural. It's from the French, Anglo-French vision, right? And so it's our ability to imagine something better. Albert Einstein says that imagination is more powerful than knowledge, right? So if we see something in somebody else, we have what are called mirror neurons in our brains. And these fire when we see somebody doing something else, whether we're aware of it or not. The same neurons that would fire if we were doing the activity will fire in ourselves. So often we can start creating change by witnessing others. The aphantasia is the imagination, right? Not often some people don't see pictures, but they might still be able to imagine something differently. So vision, it reaches beyond the thing that is into the conception of what can be. Imagination gives you the picture. Vision gives you the impulse to make that picture your own. What a phenomenal quote, right? Like it reaches beyond the thing that is. So wherever we are in our life, vision reaches beyond that. Whatever's going on in our life, vision extends beyond that. So it's into the concept of what can be. And then our imagination gives us that picture where we can actually see it. Catherine Lee talked about being on Oprah. She was on Oprah, I think 3 times, and she imagined herself so vividly that she had a pre-membering of that event. It was so clear she had a memory, as she calls it, of things yet to be. So your imagination allows you to create it so clearly that you put yourself there before you're there. And then vision gives you the impulse to act on it, to really go after it. Imagine is the most powerful word in the English language. It might also be in other languages. As Albert Einstein says, more important than knowledge. You want to create a vision so vividly, it becomes a memory of things yet to be. You can imagine being at peace. Like, look at this picture. Imagine yourself there. What would you be feeling? What would you be seeing? What would you be hearing? You can put yourself there as though it already is. We don't worry about the how to. That's not part of visioning. Imagination is that we are it. We are there. We are complete. It is us. We are it. But we don't have to figure out how we got there. Not yet. That'll solve itself. We create a fascination with it. We can't let it go. It's like we get fixated on this thing. So it renders you unable to resist, to attract the whole intention of, right? Fascinated. We become fascinated to it. We become fixated by it. We become obsessed by our vision. And that's when we know we've got it, because no matter what happens in our life, we never let go of our fixation with the vision we have in mind. Research shows that when you have vision and you start to have a clarity of your picture of your future as possible for you, you create hope. Hope research says that hope is the belief that tomorrow will be better than today and that you have the power to make it so. It is a fundamental element of our capacity to live life well. Isn't that interesting? When you can see yourself there, you start to have hope that you can create that it's possible, and that you have the power to do it. Hope theory says that when we have a goal, we will find a pathway, and we have the agency to choose it into our lives. We have the freedom to do that, which leads us into the next journey of surrender. How interesting that we go from uncertainty to where nothing is sure, everything is possible, to recognizing that all the resources that we need for any creation we can imagine are already around us, to creating the vision so vividly in our minds that we become fixated by it. Now we dive into the creation of it. How do you do it? Surrender is a big part of this. First off, raise the white flag. Admit that you don't know. Admit that you have no idea how it will connect. Old French means to give back or give over to another. You turn it over to your highest self, your intuition, your God, your guidance, whatever will put you in tune with what needs to happen next. Surrender is like a fish finding the current and going with it. Mark Nepo. Our dreams, our identities, our ambitions, our relationships, they are often cocoons that lead us to the next. What a cool thought. The person we were before created the foundation for the person we will be tomorrow. So why would we reject that? We wouldn't be who we are without that. And we wouldn't be who we will be without any of it. So we start to embrace the cocoons. We start to embrace and let go of the ego. The ego wants to know how we're going to do it. It wants evidence. It wants support. So we're just going to get rid of the E and we're just going to go. Okay. It's laying down the weapons that we use to keep ourselves small. We bring up the sword of I can't. We bring up the weapon of it's not for me, or we come up with some idea that it is impossible. We want to lay those weapons down because we tell all the stories and justifications. It's the justifications that we tell for why it can't happen to us. And people believe it. They tell us that we're accurate. But if we'll lay those down and surrender our weapons that hold us back, that's one way that we can move forward and take away the conditions. We put conditions on things. It will happen if. I will do it if I were only this, then. These are the things we say to ourselves. We condition our future. So we put conditions on it. Let go of the conditions. Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. So let go of how you're going to do it. Grow like this. Notice a tree, how it grows and it branches and bifurcates. And it puts energy into a branch and then it creates another branch. And it finds out where to flow. As a whole, the whole creation is complete. The vision is complete. The branching, the gnarliness of it, the bifurcations, that's the surrender. It will flow however it needs to flow. How you get there will come about. Surrender is the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to rather than opposing the flow of life. Non-resistance doesn't mean not doing. All it means is that any doing becomes non-reactive. So now we're just following the flow that needs to happen for our creation to become a reality. We're meeting people that we've never met before. We're being surrender versus trying to control it. We're surrendering. We're letting go. We're turning it over. It doesn't mean that we just wish and let go and hope it comes about. There's a difference here. There's nurture. Okay. Nurture means that we act on the things that come through the surrender. So as the path appears, we start to adapt and adjust to that. Charles Darwin says it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. Going back to the tree, right? When one difficulty comes up, go back. Let's go back here. Go another direction. Try that. If that doesn't work, pull back and go another direction. If that doesn't work, pull back and go another direction. As a whole, your vision will be complete. But we get to nurture and step into everything that would support our vision. Nurture from Old French means to raise, to bring up, to foster, to maintain, to provide for. It's almost as though your creation starts telling you what it's needing, and then you bring that to it. It's like a mama bird feeding the babies. They start chirping for food, and you go get a worm and you bring it back and you feed it, right? Where are you going to get a worm? I don't know, wherever it is, right? So you go get that and you feed the babies. You feed your dream, you feed your vision, you nurture it, you care for it, you give attention to it. As to someone or something that is growing or developing. You must nourish your garden like a mother, but you must protect it like a father. You protect your dreams and your actions and your energy around that. You stay in your power, right? Your garden is opportunities or businesses or dreams or simply the season of spring. It's whatever you want it to be. You can grow anything in your garden. You can grow weeds. You can grow fruit. It's up to you. Your brain doesn't care. It's a fertile ground. It'll grow anything. When you're creating, you're going to plant seeds just like the seasons, right? You're going to plant seeds and sprouts are going to start to sprout and you're going to see the seeds of change, right? Through the summer of your creation, you're going to nurture it. You're going to have intuitive guidance about what actions you should take. You're going to let go, let the creation guide you. In the fall of your creation, you're going to earn and harvest it. You're going to reap the fruits of your labors. And then you make adjustments for the next spring and you recultivate. But you have a recovery period, a resting. And many of us don't rest anymore. We don't take a break or a step back or look at an overview of how's this going? Which direction are we going? Do we want to keep energy going into that? Is it working? Benoit Mandelbrot really simplifies things. He says that bottomless wonders spring from simple rules which are repeated without end. So if you think about it, it's small and simple steps that when repeated create the complexity of our lives. This is a Romanoff broccoli. And you notice the self-similar patterns repeated created that beautiful piece of work, which is edible and real. You can find this in a grocery store. But notice the small steps repeated on that, and they create complexity. It doesn't have to be complicated. Sic parvis magna, which means from small emerge the great, like a mustard seed. Small actions lead to great outcomes. You think about your neurons. This isn't a neuron tree. They don't exist, but you water them, you plant them, you nurture them, you repeat them, you do it again and again, and each day seems like the other. But as you do it, the more automated it becomes, and you gain new behaviors and things you thought you never could do. I love this idea. This is what I use for my own program, is what I call the 11-11. It means I do one thing for growth, just like a tree would do. It does one thing to expand and grow, one thing to maintain, right? The growth that I've already had, I do something to maintain or nurture that growth. One thing to prune. Trees drop their leaves. They get rid of bugs. They drop bark and all kinds of things. So think about things that are holding you back, or behaviors that you're not doing that you could be doing. That's a form of pruning. And then giving back. One thing that I can give back. Think of the fruit of the tree. It gives without expectation. It'll give, and it never cares if it gets anything in return for that giving. And so do that in your life. Grow in integrity in your current capacity. Fill the container. Then get a bigger container. Grow in the capacity to be the person that can create what you're talking about. Your current reality doesn't have a say, but you can lift the anchor. Your current reality does have a say, let's say that way, but you can lift the anchor. So grow in your capacity, little by little, step by step. Think of bamboo. Sometimes you'll see no growth, no expansion. Bamboo grows underground for 3 to 5 years, and it feels like nothing's happening. And then within a short period, it'll grow hundreds of feet in the air. So trust that you're laying the foundation for your creation. Sometimes just doing that internal work, like the first 6 journeys of the 12 journeys, is just diving into that internal work. And then all of a sudden you're into your vision and you're able to do it because you're not frosting dog poop. You've actually worked through the hard stuff so that you have peace no matter what's going on in your life. Which brings us to the final journey, the fruit, the legacy journey. The legacy that you want to leave behind as you create yourself as a giant. Many people say that my life is the legacy. I think that was Gandhi. It's from the medieval legatia, a gift by will, a will. I'm leaving this to you, right? Think about that. When you're in a position to have gotten so much, the gift at this point is giving back, taking care of others, looking outside of yourself. How will you serve the world? What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others. Giving actually has an impact. So there's a little bit of a shocker here, but it's actually impactful in the body in the same way that food and sex are. So emotionally and chemically, it actually raises the endorphins so that you feel a drive to give. So there's a benefit, a real physiological benefit to giving. It's as impactful as food and sex. It fires the same wiring in the brain that food and sex do. Think about that. There's power in giving. There's wellness that comes from it. Even if you're wounded, even if you're not healed completely. In Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe they talk about the wounded healer. The person that heals is twice as likely to stay in their own healing journey when they're serving others. So even if you're not healed, you can give back. So find ways to serve others. Pablo Picasso, he says, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. My life is my message, right? So you could be a mentor to somebody. You might give back financially. You might give back by giving somebody a hug or checking in with them or doing something to remind them of their greatness. That's part of the giant's journey, is to remind others of their greatness and to inspire that in them so that they go through their own giant's journey. Oprah Winfrey, she says that a mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. A mentor is someone who allows you to know that no matter how dark the night, in the morning, joy will come. A mentor is someone who allows you to see the higher part of yourself when sometimes it becomes hidden to your own view. That's a powerful thing. Sit with these questions. If you knew that 5 years from now, on this date, this would be the day that you die, what would you do in between? Who would you like to be with? What's the point of your life? What legacy do you want to leave behind? And what really matters? The beauty of all of this, and the reason I put this X in the tree, is you're exactly where you're supposed to be. When you go through the 6 root journeys and you really heal yourself from the inside out, and then you go on the growth journeys and you start to create in your world, create it the way that you have never imagined. And then you create the fruit of your journey. You give back, and all of it is a complete picture. All of it is encompassed within your personal vision of who you are. And X just means you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're right on time. You're not missing out. And you're doing exactly what you should be doing. So as we kind of finalize here, what I want to share is we have some programs that are available to you. You don't have to do these. I'm just going to share some availability. For one, go get the book, The Giants and the Smalls, The Adventure of Remy and Rit. You can get that on Amazon. It's a powerful book. That's what all of this is based on. It's the story of a small who lived in the lands of smalls. They lived small lives. They didn't know any different. They didn't think anything of it until Rit looked up and saw the giants. And it was then that he wondered if there was more to life. And he went off to overcome his own limiting beliefs and set an example. He went to the land of the giants, somewhere unknown. He faced his dragon, right? He learned from the giants. He grew like the giants. And then he shared the secrets with others, and they grew too, and everyone lived a giant life. The end, right? So it's this idea that we get to go on our own journey and create our life in any way that we can imagine. That's what the book is about, The Giants and the Smalls. If you're not a member of the Tribe of Giants, make sure you go do that. It's a community of over, right now, 4,300 people from around the world who call themselves giants. And they support and love and serve each other in this community. And so it's a great way to be around other people who are also on the journey like you. And then we have our coaching programs. So we have live events. We have the Stretch Revolution. We have the Gigante. They're all founded on the same principles that you just learned in the 12 journeys, but we really dive in. So those are the programs where you learn all of this at a deeper level. This is an overview, so it's hard to go through that quickly. So the SG programs, the Gigante programs, which means I am giant in Latin, run usually for anywhere for 2 days for a live event or up to 8 weeks, depending on what you're looking for. You can do them online on Zoom, or you can do them in person. And so we have two formats. So the SG program is an experiential group coaching program that takes you through the 12 journeys to master your highest way of being in simple and repeatable steps, as we talked about in this program. We help you recognize your giant potential and actualize it by taking you through 6 root journeys that you saw here that break through the developmental and cultural value systems that keep you from living a giant life. We open up space for life, not only to be what it is, but to transform in ways you never imagined. We follow this healing and release by taking you through 5 growth journeys where you'll learn to love uncertainty and know exactly what it takes to uncover your life's purpose and surrender to the pathways that will take you to your grandest visions. Finally, we help you discover and lean into your giant legacy, whatever that is, your life. And this will give you the why that you will need to activate your new giant life. To date, we've taught these principles to thousands of individuals from around the world. The 12 journeys have been received regardless of one's age, gender, culture, beliefs, values, ethics, and morals. And one participant said about the program, "It saved my life. Every quote, meditation, live session, and recording has helped me to grow, heal, and become who I am." Another stated, "It helped me take a deep dive into myself so I could fully step into what's possible for my life." And another said that for him, it was life confirming. It has been a program I use to become more mindful of what I want to create and of who I want to be. So not only will you learn the journeys in an experiential learning environment, but they will mold your way of being. The live individual and group coaching will ensure that you understand and retain the giant concepts for years to come and perhaps for a lifetime. So whether you make a financial commitment to create your seat in one of these programs, or you use our scholarship offerings, we expect you to show up fully for yourself and for other group members. So I am Nicholas Townsend Smith. I'll be one of the facilitators. I'm the author of The Giants and the Smalls, The Adventure of Remy and Rit, and also The Art of Accomplishment. And I hold a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. And I am on a vision and a mission to serve you in creating your giant potential. So I appreciate your time today. I just want to say thank you for being on here with me. And as always, if you're not following Wake Up with Giants TV on YouTube, go do that. We have over 500 videos that dive into each of these concepts more in depth. And so go do that. And I appreciate your time today. Go make it a giant day, and I will see you in the next video.